We can go ahead and get started then. It's 6:06. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online. I'm sorry our video situation is less than ideal. Someone turned off the computer that's in this room that allows us to access the cameras mounted on the wall. And so we have, this is the camera for video recording the room. So if you speak, you're not currently on video. If you'd like to sit in that corner, you could be, if you want to do that, if that's not too awkward to put you all in a grouping over there. It's like us versus them over here. But otherwise it should pick up your audio. So, okay. All right.
And can those online hear us through the current microphone setup?
Yes.
I'll turn that up too.
All right.
All right, well, welcome. We are on meeting 4 of this body, and we have some bunch of materials on the agenda tonight we're going to walk through, and then hopefully have a discussion with you about some of the items that we have. And kind of as we are in the, now they're getting to ready for like, we've informed you about a lot of things and laid out the groundwork so we're all on the same page so we can start to have conversations about the things that we want to see changed in the vision we want to set for moving forward in the plan. So that's kind of where we're at. To follow up from the last meeting, Stephen is going to start by going through some of the stuff from our conversations. These are all things that we noted that you asked for additional information from us about. Some of it's just sharing other information that was already existing that we went and found for you. And some of it was us doing additional research or work to inquire and follow up on issues that arose. And so those are things we'll document as part of the planning process. But go ahead, Stephen.
So we started with, there were some questions around the results of the neighborhood traffic management program. So this is information pulled from the report that was done on the neighborhood traffic management campaign. That was in 2021. It had 2 phases, the spring and then again in the fall. The spring was focused more on the local community. And then in the fall, we pushed a lot of information towards KU and KU students. And so on the screen, we've got the change in 85th percentile speeds at the test locations. So you can see kind of where speeds went down. There are a couple of spots where speeds went up or they were neutral, but the purple lines there represent the areas being evaluated, and then the dots represent whether the speed went up or down. You can see there are some areas that dropped, the 85th percentile dropped 3 miles per hour. There's, and that is, and then a little bit smaller groupings as well. That campaign, I presume that most of you have seen the yard signs at this point. The stickers that we give out still at some of our tabling events, those originated from this campaign. So there was the educational piece. This also coincided with lowering speed limits on a number of local roads. So they dropped down to 25 miles per hour. So we had the kind of informational campaign followed by an enforcement campaign. So we coordinated with the local police department, and they did targeted enforcement in these areas, starting with education. There was a brochure that was put together about traffic safety. And so it's kind of 3 phases. They started with that, and then verbal warnings, and then actual citations if they're still seeing issues in any specific areas. And so these numbers would be after the conclusion of the enforcement campaign as well.
And so this was in the context we were talking about, I think, in terms of the recommended strategies that we were looking at in terms of the value of education and encouragement or other driver behavior campaigns. And so we're bringing this back to you to show some of the impact from the data collected as part of that program in some of the changes that we're seeing as a result of that work. That kind of just gives you an idea about how it's probably one part of a larger scope of solutions, right? It's not a standalone solution. It's one kind of bigger piece of the puzzle. So we wanted to share this to you. We linked to the entire report. It's 41 pages. Feel free to read all of it. We gave you some of the specific page numbers that talk about the data related to speed data collected before and after. Again, it was only on local streets. So as we think about shared spaces where lots of people bike, that's probably a lot of those same streets. So I think we saw, based on just some of the work that we did with like our level of comfort model, where now all the street speeds are posted at 25 instead of 30 if they were previously 30 in residential. We saw some changes to those presumed level of comfort, but again, that's then based on whether or not those speeds are what's actually observed. So
So this is a map of 25-mile-an-hour speed limit roads that changed recently. And the police went out and surveyed there for a bit.
So this was part of the neighborhood traffic management program that happened in 2021. It was the whole campaign where we did we look out for each other, we stop for each other, the yard signs. As part of that campaign,
Oh, okay.
part of that,
No speed limit change.
no, that was part of the campaign was when all the local streets had posted signs to reduce the speed limit on residential streets from 30 to 25. That excluded any streets that were already lower. If it was already 20, those streets were left at
Sure.
20 because there are a number of those in our community. So in that process, before they went out and did this whole campaign, they went and collected before data. They collected speed data on all of these streets that were supposed to be a representative sample of geographically and across the neighborhoods in our community to then go and see before and after what they observed from people in terms of behavior change. And so this is the report that consultant produced as a result of the entire program and campaign that happened in 2021.
And so in 3 instances, it changed it -3 miles per hour. And in a couple of places, it went up by 1 mile. Is that significant? I mean, in the scheme of.
I mean, I think they anticipate, well, I mean, there's a lot of probably other variables happening here also. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say that. I think, irrespective of what street construction may have been happening at the time, this was also, at a post-COVID time where people had changed patterns. So if there was, it's hard to say because I don't know in terms of like, if we went back and looked at all of the average daily traffic on all these streets to know was traffic volumes down, because sometimes when traffic volumes go down, speed increases because the street doesn't seem as full. I think there's a lot of other variables in this. So this was just the data we had. And so we're sharing it with you as part of the conversation. You had asked if there was data. There was data. This is what was available from that program in result of our conversation, talking about kind of, because the committee was previously talking about in our recommended strategies, where we were talking about education, both for motor vehicle drivers and for active transportation modes, like all users, how effective are those things? And I think this is the one piece of evidence we kind of have in this report to show that these things can be part of a larger program and have some effectiveness. But oftentimes you're not doing them alone. Like you're not going to be able to just go do education. It was also partnered with enforcement, right? And like formal education and enforcement from law enforcement that was paid for as part of this program.
And that's due the 25-mile-an-hour signs, and then also the yard signs that we slow down for people.
Yes. Yeah.
Those were voluntary put out.
Yes, correct. And we still have some of those, and we take them when we table at events, and slowly people pick them up, and you probably see them still in some of the neighborhoods across the community.
There are some other reports in this document of survey results. And it's especially interesting to look at the university results. There weren't signs put on campus, but signs for both the general community and the university population. That was how a lot of people had first interacted with the program, was the yard signs. They were very prevalent. People said that was where they had seen the program first in a lot of places. And at least self-reporting in those surveys, there was good response to people saying that they understood better about waiting for pedestrians in the situations that called for it and driving slower, avoiding distractions. Kind of the highlights of those three. We look out for each other, we stop for each other, and we slow down.
So, which guys?
Well, a lot of things. I think there's a bunch of findings in the report. But I think the big probably takeaway that I have, and I haven't, we skimmed this, we looked through this again when we went to look for it and find it for you to put on, to gather up for the agenda. But I think the biggest takeaway is that our community does not have a traffic enforcement unit in law enforcement. We do not have a team that's specifically dedicated to traffic enforcement. As a result of that, we have a culture where I think particularly driver behavior, motor vehicle driver behavior is the perception is you can speed and you're not going to get ticketed. And I think, even in this program, again, only was catered to residential streets. So as part of the program, it paid officer overtime to do the education and enforcement that was part of this program. And so I think thinking robustly about how a community operates, I think some of those types of programs are really critical to ensuring that you have safety on your streets for all users and safe behavior. And so I think that needs to continue to be part of the conversation when we're talking about any mode of active transportation or any element of safety is how are we teaching and what's our cultural expectations for behavior?
Really be interesting to be able to access data from comparable cities. Cities that don't have a dedicated traffic enforcement unit versus those that do.
That would be a very fascinating research project. Yeah.
See if we're an outlier.
Yeah. And there are some concerns about I think there's always concerns about enforcement in terms of who's getting targeted. And that has to be part of the conversation in terms of who's getting targeted to get pulled over. Is it based on how you look or, and those things across the country. And so I think that's a consideration. I think we participate in the Kansas Department of Transportation's Drive to Zero program also, which is made up a number of committees, and they're exploring some options to pilot video enforcement or automated enforcement in strategic areas. They've seen some successful models that other places have done in school zones and in other places where it takes some of the human element of that out. Again, it depends where you're placing those, and if you're only, if you're only placing them in certain areas versus all, areas. And so I think those will have to be continued things that we talk about, but currently that's not legal in the state of Kansas to do that kind of enforcement. And so there has to be, KDOT's going to need to work with the state legislature to create a pilot. I mean, I think this could be an entire committee if you wanted it to be about how you do education and enforcement. It is, in fact, there's 5 different, if you're interested in that, the state is doing Drive to Zero, which is, 0 fatalities on our roadways. And they have a number of efforts they're working across their systems and in local communities to implement that's beyond just what this program was aiming to do, which is to slow speeds and change behavior in our neighborhood streets.
And I was driving. And then you turn and he's got a ticket. Because of the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
Do you know how many hours we spend at these observations?
Oh, they were traffic. I mean, they put counters down.
Oh, I see.
These are like tube counters. They did like 24-hour. I mean, they
Yeah.
would have done like 24-hour counts or left them out for multiple days. Yeah. They would have followed whatever the best practice is for counting. If it rained, they wouldn't have taken a rain day.
Or just.
I don't know which technology they use, but yes, they have
I got those counts. It
the
was,
data behind that. It was part of the larger project. So anyway, this is just kind of an anecdotal thing I think we wanted to follow up with in terms of like our community has evidence. We've done some of this programming. It obviously takes dedicated budget and time and effort. We brought in professionals who do this type of safety education. And that's what a campaign kind of looks like. And that was the intention of that program in space. And I think that specifically neighborhood traffic management in the future is going to have to continue to consider what value education and enforcement has as part of the larger program. And so those things will have to partner with whatever we end up with in a bike plan. Okay.
Excellent. Next thing we have for follow-up is the temporary traffic control. Here in Lawrence, Kansas, we have a bit of background on the current process when streets, sidewalks, and other public right-of-way is closed for work. That is guided by Chapter 16 in our city code. We've got some information on the background here, but here towards the end, we have some potential strategies that we would recommend. One of the first ones is encouraging reporting. We do have the See-Click Fix program online now for the city of Lawrence. I was talking with our temporary traffic control manager today. On that list, it is traffic sign replacement or repair is where you would go currently to report any issues. Those are then sent to MSO admin staff who get them to the proper staff to do follow-ups and check enforcement of those. So definitely use See-Click Fix, and we could look at ways to promote that to the larger public in general.
Yeah, so this was in response to, yes.
Yes.
And so this document documents kind of what the process is for how the city determines how all of those are going to get set. They get designed, they get reviewed, they get written. The challenge in that is the national guidance is either guidance for cars or guidance for pedestrians. And so depending on what type of facility you're trying to detour, you can now see that bikes kind of, if you're closing a lane and you're closing a bike lane, it's very clear you do it like, they detour kind of like autos. But if there's no parallel infrastructure, then it's like, how far do you detour? Do you know what I mean? And do you just detour on the same as the auto route? And so some of those are nuanced decisions that have to get made where there isn't a good bicycle framework for how you do it for bicyclists. Because sometimes, like shared use paths, bicyclists operate in a space that's more like pedestrians, or bicyclists operate on the sidewalk, which is more like pedestrians. And so if a sidewalk closure happens or a shared use path closure, if you have bicyclists operating in that space, then that again changes the nature of how you might detour that. And so in that finding, staff are using their judgment to help make those detours that are being proposed by often the consultant teams or whoever's or the staff teams, whoever's closing that road or route or path. And so they can do that. And with all good intentions, there's dozens of those at a time in a community, right? People can also go move some of those, particularly the pedestrian ones. And so sometimes that's why the reporting is to let them know that they can't be in all the places at once. The inspectors, like, they may have got put out right, but it may not be still right. And so that's why the reporting tool is really effective, because it alerts them that something's wrong in a place that they may not be out riding their bike. So that the reporting is really, or if it's something that doesn't work right away, those are lessons we can learn. And I think that's where when we looked into it some more, these potential strategies are things that we would probably propose adding as recommendations then to our strategies list. Some of them is stuff that we can do, which is like Steven's talking about, if we need to create a little flyer that we give to the bike clubs to say, hey, if you're experiencing this, here's like just this thing you email blast to tell everybody this is how you do it. Same as like bike lane cleaning or other things. If we just need to educate people about a more effective process to get something fixed, that's number one. That's a low hanging fruit. If we need to then, based on these other strategies, start reporting. So we have a weekly traffic update. Maybe one of the solutions is we just start reporting when closures are going to impact bikeways on that weekly traffic update. It's an email list, it's documented, it's a record. People then can reference that and get a notification instead of you're out on your ride. Again, it still requires you to read something or follow something or something, but it's at least documented. And then the last one is in this strategies, which Stephen was about ready to get to, which is it's possible we could create some additional supplemental guidance for the people who do this work on the regular. We've seen some examples when we started researching and looking at it based on addressing common scenarios, or sometimes that's clarifications about when or when not a certain detour may or may not be appropriate. Like for, maybe the loop, there's a certain set of expectations or standards that might be that you might handle differently. Like you're not going to detour the loop on a 2-mile detour, or do you know what I'm saying? Like there's some length definitions, or we've seen a bunch of different examples. And I think that would be one of our recommendations, is that we could, in that right of way permitting process, develop some additional supplemental guidance to help fix some of the things that we then find are common issues. Because those are going to continue, closures are going to continue to happen as we do work in our community. So this was like us deep diving in to go talk to all the people who are doing this, figure out what's supposed to be happening, understanding that sometimes there's these nuances that, don't get controlled or don't, get known, and then realizing here's kind of what people are doing for best practice and things that we thought were reasonable to recommend in the plan. Okay, so you can read all of that. That's a lot of work. That's what we're trying to describe. The next time you see our recommendations, this will be a part of our recommendations based on the feedback from the committee. And then do you think something like some sort of simple flyer talking about some of those common problems would be something that would be advantageous to distribute to the select group of people that are most commonly affected?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I am across, I see that you want the concerns reported through C-Click Fix. But I have, there have been other reporting tools that I have found and thought that was maybe the right place to
Okay. Yes.
report a concern.
Yes.
So yeah, being specific for the correct place to report things to actually get fixed would be.
Okay. Yeah. And this is, C-Click Fix is evolving over time in terms of all the things the city is putting into it to get into workflows. And so you're right that this hasn't been the tool forever. And it's the newer tool, and more things get added into it because on the back end, they're building out the systems that create workflow by resident requests that go into this system and filtering process, then that gets it to the right place. For some more emergency things, there are still numbers on, like a phone number of an emergent, an on-call staff online, like for some signal outages or other things too. But for the most part, any of these things, then it creates all of the workflow in one place, which I think is helpful to get it queued up, to get it addressed.
Or is it still separate, like the reporting a dangerous traffic condition?
So that is a separate tool right now. And there are a whole plethora of other things that I think I would call them more forms that they use for different things. This C-Click Fix has mostly so far evolved into what's tied to most closely to city asset management. So it's tied to things that have like an asset inventory. So like we have a signpost, we have a trash can, we have curbing, we have, you have a lane of the street, you have things. So if it's tied to that, then it gets added to the workflow because it's tied to that. When you drop the pin, it gets tied to that asset, right? Some of those other things aren't necessarily tied to the asset. So you're right, that traffic concern reporting form is currently just a separate Esri like web tool that feeds to a map that PD reviews, as opposed to in this other system, this is mostly like all of the core city services like parks crews, streets crews, water systems and stuff like that. I can see in the future trying to integrate into fewer tools though. So, but yeah.
I can see where if there was a web page that this stuff landed on, so that I mean, because I get the weekly traffic update, they tell you what project is starting, there generally isn't any status update, it doesn't tell you when it's fixed. So like, when, you know, they were doing the K-Dot interchange at Sixth and, the loop, K-10, and
Mhm.
going through the bridge, under the bridge at Sixth Street was out for a long time.
Hmm.
I wonder if that's fixed now, how would I find out in real time that that's, you know, that it's open again, and so.
Yeah.
You go to this webpage that says, here's the state of bike routes in the city, and yeah, that's still out.
I can ask. I don't know how they,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how all in the back end that workflow, yeah, like how it all
Yeah.
comes together and some of those things, but that type of feedback is always helpful to the communication staff who are responsible for putting all those things together. And I know they've done increasing amount of work lately to try to also be updating a GIS spatial tool that then can feed those closures, like when something is actually hard closed, to feed those closures into Google Maps or into other mapping softwares. So like if you, I don't know, if you're even driving around town, if you use Google Maps to a destination, you'll start to see like there's some closures, and sometimes Google just picks up on that after time of people report, individual users reporting it. But the city is using an Esri tool that allows them to report that directly for the closure, so it pops up more quickly on I think whoever picked all the softwares basically that pick up that Esri service. And so if you use that tool, that should be something else that you notice, but it just helps if you're using that routing, which is really important, I think, when we know we're gonna have a lot of visitors in town, like for an event like the World Cup, and they're going to be maybe using
Yeah.
mapping to get
It's really
around.
annoying if you go to a new town and the maps don't show
Right.
that you can't go that way and
Yeah.
you don't know where to go.
Well, because visitors aren't signing up for our weekly traffic
Right.
updates, right? So like, yeah.
Yeah, it's the loop.
In terms of,
They know that the loop exists and where it is,
I mean, there are different
see-
maps,
I
but,
see a lot of cyclists and they're
oh,
new, I mean, they're
Yeah.
college students, whatever, and they're riding up Delaware Street from 9th to 11th Street and going left on 11th and not knowing that there's a shared use path that's designated the loop,
Yeah.
and then it goes through Hobbs Park. And so
so we have an online map, we have a paper map, like a city hosted
there's a
stuff.
city hosted.
There's the bicycle rideability
Okay.
map.
Yeah.
And then,
There's the web map.
Okay,
yeah, and then there's an online setup on OpenStreetMaps that we're working to update, because that's what a lot of those systems take their feed from for bike inventory stuff, data sets. And some of that's updated too. So like if you go look at OpenStreetMaps, that's like even more, it's a free open source mapping tool. And it's, if you want to dive into like your community and see all sorts of different layers, you can turn on and off and all sorts of things. It's a very powerful tool that then that other people aggregate from.
What is it called?
Open Street Maps.
Yeah. Let's just. And if you find a mistake, email me.
Is that-
Yeah, 80 is an editor.
It is, so it's a community-based map with moderators.
Like a national, like an online,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like international, like it's the whole world, and it's just.
Yeah. Open source.
Yeah.
anyone can
Yes. And it edits get peer reviewed, and there's an approval process, and it's. Yeah, it's like an open map, it's like an open map source, like they're really about transparency and open information, so. Yeah, so I think all those things are kind of like the pieces of how it works together. They're not as simple as you think sometimes, but.
You're on that portion of the loop on Delaware. I don't know any.
Oh, really? Yeah, well, and I don't really think that. Well, is it men that only ride the road, or?
I think it's just because of the corporations the penetrations into the path. All the driveways for the apartments along there. Maybe so much more for businesses because they're gone. But, but yeah, everybody likes it. Everyone.
Yeah. I live a half a mile from there, so, and I gather from Tenth Street to where the house and.
Okay, so turning on to 10th and then going to the property, that's.
No, I would just, I'm giving you those,
Is
they're
that
gonna be
more
hard to
than-
read.
Delaware.
This is our next topic. We have some other road standards.
Exactly.
11th is. Yeah, we got a couple of different questions. 11th Street in that portion is marked as a shared lane. I would have to check the map for Delaware in that specific area.
It's a truck route. I don't think.
I
it
don't
is.
believe
I
it's
don't
shared
believe it
lane
is.
along that because,
It
yeah,
has
because
to
it's a designated.
Yeah, like the shared, yeah. A shared
Yes,
lane. Yeah.
shared lane,
Shared.
yeah.
And then, and you get to drive down the point of the Sharrow, and cars have to politely wait for an opportunity to pass between. I mean,
Correct.
to
Yes.
pass you. And get out of the way. Get out of the cars is what
Yeah.
people do and
Yeah.
what people expect you to do, because unfortunately, the Sharrows ought to be able to.
Well, that'll be another part.
That'll
of
be
it.
yeah.
So,
So we have the three potential strategies here. If you have any feedback on those, let us know for the temporary traffic control. The next follow-up we had was on the complete streets policy and checklist. I think I'm
I
gonna
have some paper copy of
make
it.
this a little bigger here as well. Just kind of the results of some of the complete streets policy. There were questions around how that was how it's being implemented, and then the results of some of our recent projects. So the main columns I'd bring your attention to here would be the level of comfort before and after the construction. And you can see that nearly all of them drop within our current level of comfort range of 3 or below after the construction has been completed.
So this was in relationship to, we talked about, is the level of comfort model and or the complete streets policy, which is to evaluate all these reconstruction projects. So this, and we included a standalone project on here too, which you'll see doesn't have a complete streets checklist because the whole project was a complete streets project. But to kind of assess, you said, well, I don't know. Tell me what's been done under the policy. And so this is us going back and finding all of those checklists and showing you the scope of the project and what improvement was done and how that was assessed based on level of comfort.
Got 23rd to 14th Street on maps, and that hasn't been done yet.
Correct. That's a project that's funded. It'll be constructed that's a next year construction. It was before at 5 and it went to 2 and our goal is 3 and below. Lower scores are more comfortable.
But it hasn't.
No, but we're just showing you what the projected level of comfort is. We're saying based on the design, based on the facility that's being designed, that is the level of comfort that is based on the tool.
You hope that.
If the curb protected bike lanes that are being designed are installed, the level of comfort will be a 2 based on the scoring criteria. So we're trying to show that.
Okay, and who says what? I mean, I guess I thought this was before, there was a survey before.
No, this is based on in the bike plan, we have a level of comfort tool.
But there's a matrix with guidelines. for
Well,
comfort, So.
yeah, but we don't have that colored chart up there. Can you go pull
So
up on
they're
the,
projected.
just a second, I'm gonna show
Yeah.
what chart this is. Go on our bike committee on the boards from our last open house and pull up the part that shows the level of comfort scoring criteria, if you don't mind. Do you know what that's the easiest place to find it, I think.
Matrix documents also in that. filter. If that's or. we don't want
Just
the
do,
color.
yes, but it's in here, so we can just do it here, because then everybody can see where to find it. Okay. There you go. So in our current bike plan, we have assessed the level of comfort, and this is the tool that we're talking about in terms of, yeah, you gotta zoom into that little table, but based on what people have told us, their desire to have more comfortable infrastructure, we have affiliated those with speed and volume criteria based on information we have in our GIS data sets to be able to assess the level of comfort of like an objective, just kind of level of comfort of a roadway. So in the complete streets process, they're collecting data if they're doing a reconstruction project with speed and volume of the roadway. And they can assess 5 is least comfortable, 0, 1 is most comfortable. Our goal in the plan was to design everything at a 3 and below based on the scheme. So you can use this chart in reverse by saying, okay, if I have a road that's this speed or volume, where does it fall based on if it has no facility in the very bottom line, you can see what scoring it has if it has no facility. And then as you on the left, the far left side, you see the bottom, it's shared street, then it goes to minor separation and major separation. As you move up the rows, you're increasing the level of comfort that somebody may feel with facility type, and that's reflected in the allowable speed and volumes. So when all of those scores on that list are a way to translate to us that things moved from what we perceive as less comfortable to more comfortable based on the implementation of the Complete Streets policy and this level of comfort guide. So in that conversation, when we were talking about, is it working or not? I think there's 2 things you have to think about when you look at these in that chart is reviewing the projects and seeing what was there before, or if there was anything versus what got implemented and deciding in your perspective, does that meet what we would generally want to assume is a level of comfort 3 or below? That's our community goal. If it does not, then that tells me then what I want to hear from you and you need to be telling me is we need to alter what we find acceptable for these speed or volumes to lower settings, or we need to change our goal overall. It could be one or the other. If you think, yes, these are generally making improvements and more comfortable, then maybe this is working and we need more time to do it. Again, this has only been in place for the last 5 years since the last bike plan. So in the scheme of city development, that's a very short amount of time for a number of projects.
And individual opinions don't really matter as when it comes to this, and bicycle boulevards have a comfort level of 2. They are not comfortable to me because I constantly have to move back into the lane with the car and check and make sure the car isn't there, and I go around I constantly have to move in and out of traffic with the car. And I would rather be on a street, on a lesser used street, which is comfortable. And, and all these things, perceptions are different. And I think I was at a bicycle advisory committee meeting, and one of the commissioners on there, we're talking about the bike lanes on Wakarusa Street, and they're 5 or 7 feet wide. And that person felt really uncomfortable riding in a 5-foot wide bike lane. And I'm thinking, God, I'd love to ride in a 5-foot wide bike lane. And I feel very comfortable there, but that other person doesn't feel comfortable. And I don't feel comfortable in a bicycle boulevard. And somebody else does, and so.
And that's the
It's-
biggest challenge of this is we're building a tool to try to help direct us in the right direction of building facilities that should be more comfortable to more diverse group of people. And you're right, not everybody is going to find everything the same level of comfort. And I think probably that's the biggest challenge in this space is that there are varying levels of comfort. And to translate that into a community plan, you have to probably leave some flexibility in your framework. Because there's also nuances where the conversation is when you go into a project or a scope or a budget, do you know what I mean? In terms of like thinking about retrofit locations and options where something may not be the highest level of comfort, whether it meets the goal or not, but it's either do that or nothing.
Yeah.
And those are the trade-offs that we're making in values as a community. So we're trying to develop tools to help convey that. But we have consistently heard, and I think this tool was trying to do that with the last plan, which is to convey some set of metrics that speak to engineers, right? And people designing this infrastructure based on all of the perspectives we're hearing from the community. But overall, I think we hear separated, desire to be separated from motor vehicle traffic, especially as speed and volume increases. Like that's a blanket statement I think we could say about for almost not probably everyone, because some people just will ride anywhere but I'm just saying, I think that's a general consensus. So the idea is the tool is trying to help us, direct us. Is it going to get it right every time? I don't know. I'm not sure that that exists because there's a lot of nuanced situations where if we're going to build it new, do you know what I mean? Or we have really wide right of ways and like in a lot of places, like where you're talking about where we're building it and have that space, you have a lot more design choices for what to do when you don't, if you have, houses closer to and less right of way, then really automatically you are pressed in a situation, I think that you have to make more trade-offs and conflicts and compromises. And so,
Yeah, and Castle would be an example, cause there's a 5-foot bike lane and then there's a shared use path.
correct,
And
yeah.
Give me the shared use path,
Yeah.
because I'm more comfortable in that
Yeah.
than I am in that
Yeah.
5-foot bike.
Yeah.
lane.
And so you've kind of seen the evolution as we've redesigned parts of different streets where that has happened. And right there, they had really wide right of way to be able to do that. Iowa's another example of a higher volume arterial street where the right of way was more constrained, thinking about the Iowa project that's right by us now, where shared use path is being installed on the part of this road that it doesn't, and there will be no on-road infrastructure, on lane and car travel infrastructure.
Sharrows would be,
These are the same.
yeah, marked shared
Oh,
lanes.
Marked shared lane. They are sharrows. Sharrows just like the slang. A shared
Yeah.
lane arrow. It's like yeah, so. Okay, any other thoughts about specific, I mean, this is. We can, two things. If you have specific thoughts, we can talk more about this now. Part of one of our next agenda items where we are looking at the level of comfort matrices is kind of going to be tied to this, I think, in terms of guidance. So unless you have something real specific, maybe we keep moving on for the interest of time, but no, I'm not shutting down this conversation. We're still talking about this same concept. Okay. All right. Let's see what else you got on what else do we have on?
Yep. All right.
Okay. We have, Stephen's got university recommendations.
Yeah, let's see if I can actually
Okay.
click on them.
I'll let you pull that up and I'll just start talking about it.
Uh,
We have worked with our partners at the university and established what we're calling a university recommendations list. KU had a bike plan. Haskell has not, that we know of, had any planning in this sense. This is taking from that and again, a best practice review across the country. We then worked with Hayden, who's representing the university, to go through and assess some of these based on conversation and the feedback we got. And we'll be continuing to set up a meeting and talk about implementation, because some of this is all really going to be contingent at the University of Kansas, particularly upon getting a steering committee revitalized in a space to work on some of these initiatives. And we're welcome to feedback and conversations with our Haskell partners as well.
Yeah, I believe
So-
we have one on the call tonight, but yes. And so this is in the same breakdown as the recommendations we presented earlier to the steering committee for the general community.
So what you see on this one that you haven't seen on the community one is the priority and resource intensity assessment. We've done that here. We will be bringing you back the other set of recommendations with kind of that same analysis at a future meeting for the whole city list. Just to kind of give us some scale and scope about priority and things based on the feedback you've given us from previous meetings, and what we've assessed for intensity of resources, so.
The next one we have on the agenda here is just a follow-up. There were some questions about the 21st Street Bicycle Boulevard. We presented that information at a previous meeting for the steering committee, but the data we had was for west of Naismith. So we looked at some of our older data that we had counts for already. We wanted some newer data than what we had, so we did get some counts just right towards the beginning of or not the beginning, towards the end of October. You can compare those to the 2018 counts, see the changes there.
You're good. Yeah. Part of the issue is, wherever we did before counts is a little bit where we were limited to go back and do after counts, right? Because we
Yeah.
had to be able to compare data. So we found screen lines that they had done other before counts on to match up, to line up for after counts. So this is in addition to, because I think you had asked for some counts east of Naismith, from the, oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Like, thank
I
you.
just don't need
Thank
your
you.
post.
Yeah, it's a danger area. This is a barricade,
time-
invisible barricade. I know.
Yeah. So we got these numbers. We will be doing more robust counts in the spring. We do have best practice that we try to follow as far as time of year, week, which days of the week, weather concerns, things like that. So
Specific to this quarter,
Those-
that's just bike ped counting in
yeah,
general.
just in general. So we will be doing more counts, but wanted to provide an update on just kind of what that area is looking like currently with the bicycle boulevard in place.
On the western star on the table I'm looking for.
Yes.
The difference of 11, minus 11, negative 11 miles per hour represents typographical error being -1. Basically, the average speed goes from
Oh.
31.
Yep, that was an error on my end. That would be, yeah. Thirty-one is probably the typo on that. I believe 39 was what it should be. It's that dropped to 25? It would be 20 for the bike boulevard. Yes. But these would be, 2018 would be prior to the bike boulevard, so it would have still
In
been
a 30.
a 30-mile-an-hour street. And unfortunately, 9 miles over the posted speed limit would not be terribly surprising. Yeah,
But in 2025, it was 28 miles an hour. And the speed limit.
that is the average. Correct.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are still speeding.
But you think this thing- all this thing-
Well,
Yeah.
41 to 28.
Yeah.
39.
39 to 20, 39 to 28, correct.
Think about memory correctly. I think that's where you have the chicane. And the posted recommended speed limit there, that speed limit recommended speed is 15 miles per
Mhm.
hour. So not compared to like 15 to 28, it's still like pretty large, but still reduction 13 miles per hour. And these are pretty robust sample sizes. I mean, that's huge.
but we got almost 3 mile an hour in decrease in speed in some places just by putting signs out saying, please go slower.
Yeah,
And
with
so here's
enforcement.
the
With
question.
enforcement.
They
Yeah.
were, police were out enforcing in those areas and
As
pulling
we-
people over to do both education and ticketing as part of that program.
You can tell how
No.
people
The,
are going, you have things like.
yes, that's
As
how we
well.
collected the data, but that data was collected after police presence in the area for that other program. Part of the neighborhood traffic management program was dedicated officer time to be on those streets, pulling people over to give either education, warnings, or tickets. And that's what made the behavior change, was not just the signs, but the fact that you had law enforcement presence in all of those places doing education and enforcement.
So by having police officers.
But the police officer there was not, the police officer was not there when we collected data. It was a residual impact of lowering speeds from the time.
Have been out.
Yes, yes.
Few weeks after.
Yes. Yeah. If we went to count those to those same locations today, I would assume that some of those benefits will have been lost. Yes.
I believe it was a little over 400 hours of enforcement total.
Okay.
Yeah. That program paid for specific for those places. So, and these counts are without any special targeted enforcement. This is just built environment
Yeah.
improvement changes.
Yeah.
So signs and,
Which I think goes back to the original kind of presentation around that neighborhood traffic management, is how these pieces all have to work together. We can't just build our way out. We can't just educate. It's got to be how these all work together.
In.
39, yeah.
The speed.
yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so
I just
when
keep
you
typing
think
too
about
fast
it in
sometimes.
terms of level of comfort, when you think about that in terms of level of comfort, the things people tell us is less volume and less speed. If there's volume, that's what makes comfort happen. And so in that sense, this is working. This is working for what our tool is trying to get to. Again, there's a lot of different elements, I think, that go into that in terms of how that gets designed. Do you know what I mean? Like in the case where you talked about having to move, chicanes are one tool. Maybe chicanes are not the tool we like for bike boulevards. Maybe we like other tools. Bike boulevards have lots of different tools. Chicanes are just one of those. So do you see how that's kind of like, don't write off bike boulevards entirely? Because I think some people have called them neighborhood green streets or shared streets, and they have a lot of benefit, and you can use a lot of different traffic calming tools to get that achieved speed or volume elements to make the street safer for all the users. In this case, we tested chicanes. Maybe that's not the specific element of the bike boulevard that people like or not.
Mathematical observation, it's interesting to note that the volumes are basically the same too, so it's not like people are like, the driver or like taking on from the.
Yeah, but I think they can't because they're getting to the high school parking lot. So I think they may not be going the whole length of 21st Street because now they can't, maybe because they're some of the block, because where it blocks, but they're still using that route to get into the high school.
But yeah, not like that. I don't think people went from Massachusetts at 21st Street. All the way through.
No,
The-
but depending on where they may be not coming as far any longer on 21st Street, they now have to come in at a different part on 21st Street, just because of the restrictions at Oswald and at Louisiana.
It's also, this is, really interesting, mostly just like, observation, that this was done. For the cost of like. Would be. This was done for $500,000 for the difference would probably.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that got designed as the original part of the bike boulevard also got cut in the budget. So again, it's a conversation about depending on which elements you end up implementing to use as the tool when you're designing these types of streets, it's basically to slow speeds or lessen volume to make the street more usable or safe, more comfortable feeling.
And what you just said was, for example, 6 blocks of bicycle boulevard costs less than 6 blocks of shared use to build. That's an interesting one. I did not realize that.
And
Yeah.
one last thing, I'll try to tell my-
No, you're fine.
Absolutely.
One thing that's been interesting to note on the 21st in Louisiana intersection, you know, there's a traffic diverter there, so if someone's traveling east on 21st, they can no longer turn left going north on Louisiana. And I live there, I use about Boulevard multiple times a day. But I have, I have heard people be kind of curmudgeonly about that diverter. But I went out, I looked at the crash data, and basically there was a crash at that intersection every quarter. And then once that diverter was installed, it dropped to 0. And I think like that is a big benefit to our community. Each crash, I think the averages for an average crash costs about $6,000 just economic benefit costs, not even like quality of life costs. So like over time, just for that intersection alone is really good. But people are aggravated by it. You know, so
Yeah.
there's like a strange tension that good luck in terms of managing that,
Yeah, and I think it's a continued conversation as we work to implement bikeways. That's the first one we did. What did we learn from it as we slate other ones in a future, 5-year plan? That those are going to be conversations, and that when we select any road for those types of projects, there's a planning process that comes along with that, which is a conversation with neighborhoods and the neighborhood and users of that street to understand what their safety concerns are, to collect data about, what traffic is doing, both speed and volume, to try to make those streets come down to a place of usability in terms of speed and volume for all users. Yeah. So, the thing that's interesting to point out is the cost variation in these. Yes, there is a lot of difference in the cost, but the same things that would be for just any street. A street that may be eligible for a bike boulevard is probably not necessarily in this community the same street that we would put a shared use path on. Our community has chosen some of that based on speed and volume. Like we would not use elements of a bike boulevard on an arterial street. And that's so I think some of those are driven by the conditions of what the infrastructure is. So. Okay.
Excellent. And speed and volume brings us to our next agenda topic. That's all for the follow-ups.
Okay, so this is in relate, and will you just pass these all the way around?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that way everybody has it in front of them, they can look at it. So this is in direct response to the conversations that we've had. This is where I was talking about, there's a follow-up to this continued conversation about facilities and comfort. And so we had been asked to look at the NACTO all ages and abilities framework, and I linked in the agenda the actual source of both of these things, but here I'm trying to put them on a side-by-side for you about where they come from. We converted the NACTO guide into the red and green chart here to match the format of the chart we have in the bike plan. Because what we're trying to be able to show you is in the same context where you can look back and forth what we have in the current bike plan for level of comfort and appropriateness based on NACTO and AASHTO and all the guides when we did the bike plan 5 years ago. And then the NACTO all ages and abilities guide, which is really talking about driving increased comfort for all ages and abilities of users and what those standards are look like in that same space. So thoughts or observations about that, looking at them side by side?
Tell me what shared street and the minor separation or major.
So that's again back to the thing where those facility types, so everything in the shared street, marked shared lanes, advisory bike lane, shoulder bike lane, bike boulevard. The bicycle is operating in the same shared space in a shared street space with cars. Once you get to minor separation with a conventional bike lane or a buffered bike lane, there is paint now separating the space. So there's minor separation. And then the major separation on the bottom is now we've physically done something else to separate the space. So with a protected bicycle lane or a shared use path, you now likely have a curb or some sort of vertical barrier that is also separating it. So as you go down that list, you grow in intensity of separation. Which then again, you can see why as you go out on the chart, it's allowable for higher speeds and volumes, those same facility types.
So average annual daily traffic, so
That's-
what's the difference between, I mean, the blue, the first entry in the blue and the yellow?
Okay, so like marked shared lanes, in our current bikeway plan, marked shared lanes are where we would say most ideal in about 5,000 volume of cars a day and a speed at the bottom of about 25. Do you see that?
Yeah.
The NACTO, but that's where they're like advisable. Engineering judgment is that gray area. Okay. Okay. All right. So you can see already our chart on the left has a lot more engineering judgment. Okay. So then on the right chart, what the NACTO all ages and abilities is saying is marked shared lanes should only really be used when they're less than 2,000 AADT daily trips and a traffic speed of 20. So they're saying those are more, they're saying this guide is more restrictive about when you use those only on lower volume, lower speed streets. Yes, yes. And that's something a committee member asked us to look at in relationship to changes they want to talk about for the bike plan we're writing. Correct.
Currently.
This is what we've. Well, when we designed this, we used NACTO and ASHTO. We used these guidebooks that we've adopted. They're adopted in our street design guidelines, but they have been more permissive and now they're getting more restrictive as communities are learning that people want things that are more comfortable. And so I think that keeps evolving. So that's one thing that's happening is people want more separation and protection, especially with higher speed and volume. And those thresholds are moving based on recommendations in the national guidance. And that's what I think you're seeing partially here.
We move for Lawrence, we'll start collecting more.
Well, I think that's what a committee member has asked us is to say that this chart our current level of comfort chart should be modified to more closely align with all ages and abilities. So somebody asked us that at a previous meeting. So we're bringing that to you to show you what that would mean.
So the NACTO matrix also has other considerations that aren't represented on here, but they would be like our equivalent of engineering best practice. So they do, I don't know what they call it, like curb density, how many people are.
So like if you have like lots of driveways or if you have bus stops with lots of pedestrian activity.
Yeah, bus stops, and that's just data that we don't have.
Well, we don't have it to model it.
Yeah, we don't
In a
have it to
model. It can be
model it. We
used
don't
on a
have it.
project by project basis to evaluate the
But
situation.
our engineers essentially do that. I mean, they are going out to these project sites, they are, looking at these roads, so I just note
Yeah.
that, like, it looks like ours is a lot more permissive in that gray. There's no real way.
But
to show.
We haven't, yeah, but so we don't have the record to go and show you exactly where all the things we've done and where they fit in here. This is just what our tool says is allowable. Have we done it all? No, but we have definitely done things that are outside of the NACTO.
I think another thing to
Expectation.
consider with the NACTO matrix is, do the recommendations that the NACTO matrix has, are they reflective of Lawrence? Are they reflective of our infrastructure that already exists? It's just something to keep in mind.
If I may, I think that if you look at the numbers and if you compare from the left side.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers to what NACTO, was putting out. The numbers on the left are most closely aligned to the Federal Highway Administration's rural bicycle design guidelines. And so that's why, for instance, that's why you have so much leeway, because
There's a lot of different
there's a
variation.
lot of different variations
Yes,
in rural
yes.
communities. But I don't think, and personally, I don't believe that. I don't believe we're a rural community.
But when we did this bikeway plan before, the last time we did this bikeway plan, we were planning for all the communities in Douglas County. And then we wrote two plans out of doing the work for the whole areas. So that is, I think, how that got translated is we're putting together a design code, we're using all these tools. And that small and rural town guide had a lot better graphics than some of the other things to be able to convey to the public. And you know that because you've looked at it. And so that got translated in that space in terms of what the guidance says in all these places. And now here's this other tool that we've converted into this kind of same graphic to show you the differences.
Well reasoned. I think you still have to be context dependent, just because urban is so much driven by the context, like, have they been traveling down a one-way street, are they, is the lane, because
Lane
I think
width.
we've all experienced that drivers will behave differently based on different context. But to me, at least the numbers on the right are just better. This is where I think
That's the direction we might wanna go. I mean,
Yeah,
we wanna get aligned better with NACTO, and that's it.
And
Yep.
that's what we
True
mostly
statement.
wanted you guys to see the difference between the two, because we plan on having our own conversations with our city engineer to see like how we could move towards being more.
Right.
in
we
line.
want to understand if they have any concerns of internal staff that they would see this and think like, oh, do we really want the minimum volume set for do you really want the minimum volume for shared use path or these other things set there? Or do you want the flexibility to be able to do them even if it's below standard, because there may be another reason why you want something like at a higher level of protection? Do you know what I mean? Like maybe you have a school nearby and you need something at a higher level of protection or something based or whatever. And so we're going to go have that conversation too. I think what I think we want to hear tonight is overall, we want to move towards more comfortable, which means less permissive of design elements when they're not recommended by NACTO.
Some of the. Because it says posted travel speed.
Yes,
Does some of that, because.
Yes.
driver's behavior
yes,
is affected, you can have posted and you can have expected. travel
Yes.
speed.
yes,
And they can be very different things on
yes,
different.
or
roads,
actual
right?
too, yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, all three of those can be
Yeah.
very different. Yeah. Yes, Yeah.
Engineering. for one particular thing, like. You can post whatever you want post,
Yeah.
but what are people gonna actually drive and how does that change?
Yeah.
Where you need to fall on these.
and for the most part, like we get from KDOT, every 3 years, they do AADT, so they do traffic counts for volumes. For speed data, that has to be something you're going out to collect for a specific project. There's no carte blanche continued collection of any kind of regular interval of speed data unless it's like tied to a project. So usually when you see any of those projects, like a transportation element project happening, a roadway project, they've went out and collected specific speed and volume or turning movement data specific to that project to inform as part of their engineering judgment, lots of variables in the roadway. And so those would not be then based on posted, they would be based on actual speeds in that understanding. But then just because it's today's actual speed doesn't mean that it's the design speed as you're moving forward. And so as you think about that, one of the things to think about would be like, bike boulevards could be an example of that. You may have a street that has a little more volume or speed than what these currently allow, but you're designing it to, you're going to change the road expectations and design the road to now operate at a different level because you're doing things that either restrict turning movements onto the street or you're doing things that slow people down when they're on the street. And so part of that is not just that it's what it is today, it's what it is based on what you're proposing in the design too. So overall, there's interest in moving towards NACTO's all ages and abilities.
I do think that, I like that the city currently allows shared use paths at all volume and speed limits. Whereas NACTO looks at just higher volumes and higher speed limits for shared use path and a protected bike lane. I think the city uses too much engineering leeway on some of the other separation patterns, but I do think that transitioning a blend at least, some of the NACTO policies would be a good step.
We will take that and have that conversation with our internal staff and bring you something back in a plan that looks more closely, more restricted and in line with what our vision is for a comfortable bikeway. Okay, now let's go back thinking about that level of comfort chart. We will then use that chart where we have the colors and go back to look at this and make those similar adjustments on that level of comfort chart based on what is allowable here. Because if it's something that we are reducing what the speed and volume is that's allowable here, then I think that is going to inform what we would call level of comfort on that chart. Does everybody feel comfortable with us coming back and proposing something then that lines up with what we have here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We will do that. All right. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, does.
Yep.
Okay,
See if you're gonna share it. You're good.
so the
You can't pull too far.
Stephen. Just grab
Oh.
it.
Yeah, it's
okay,
over there.
So,
It's over at the end of the table.
yeah.
We did a second phase of public engagement.
So survey 2, we were asking for people to identify connections that we feel are missing, gaps on their day-to-day route. So this one is organized a little different than the last one. It's organized by how we received the comment. We only got a handful of actual written public comments. We got one over email, and then we have the results. So you can see the map in there.
There's a big map, 11 by
scattered
17.
around. Every point is a point from someone's survey. And they all have an ID number, and that is attached to the big ol' table. Some of the points, they didn't leave comments. So if you see like 31, for example, left a comment one place but not the other, things like that. There are also some points in the table that you may not see on the map. That's because it was out of the scope for this plan. So outside of city limits, since this is the Lawrence bike plan. But they're still in there, and we will still
Yeah, we have
keep
that
them in
plan
mind
update.
for our next bike plan.
So we're giving this to you now because this sets up, I think, the conversation that we want to be able to have with this group for our next meeting, which is spend some time with these, your experiences biking and where people told us their priorities are, where they'd like gaps, some of the things that are specific points. And we will come back for our next conversation prepared to have some maps. And so we've printed also 11 by 17 versions of our existing and planned bikeways map. They're at the corner of the table over there. And I'd encourage you to take one. That's the map with the comments, but there's another one that has all the bikeways on it. And I would encourage you to take that with you. It's homework time. As you're going through these comments, we've went through them and marked up a map where we think there are going to be places on the map where we need to have conversations about routing. about projects to identify in the plan, about priorities. And so it would be helpful if before you come back to our next conversation, that you've done some homework to familiarize yourself with the points you see on the map, the comments you got, and mark up the locations on the map where you want to make sure that we have some specific conversations about. Since we already have a bikeway, the existing network and the future network, we're in this place where this is a bike plan update. So we would envision it as we're shifting. We hope that we're not rewriting the whole thing from scratch, right? We're starting with a basis of something that already exists. And so you can see the majority of comments I think that we got from the things we reviewed are in relationship to desire to close the loop sections. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. That is very closely in line with conversations or the things we heard from feedback from our first part of the planning process. And so you can read through all those, but there are some other good nuanced specific locations and points that I think also will give us the opportunity to, whether or not it may already be on the network, but they're talking about specific maybe intersection improvements or other things that I think where our current plan just looks at the network and calls out like linear segments for network and priorities. We could also, I think, and one of the things we'll talk about is develop a list of other specific projects that we would want to feed into the non-motorized prioritization to be considered for implementation. That may be, there may be 2 existing bikeways there, like at a cross, but that intersection still needs issues. I saw some of those type of comments that I think you can all call those out and mark them up, and we'll come back and we're going to talk about all of those comments and or other areas that you have that we want to have to both develop any edits that we need to the future bikeways map. And then the second part of what you have to think about is the piece of the map where we have a priority and secondary network, right? We have an overlay in the plan currently that talks about the locations where we're going to prioritize the gaps for standalone funding. And that also is up for conversation in that space. So some of the elements like where we have drawn on the priority network now with the loop, if the loop alignment changes, we'll modify that, right? We're going to move those. It's still the intention that it's the loop, but are there other places where we're missing a spoke or where we really need more access or we need to talk about what it means to have something on the priority network? Because we have Bikeway Network all across the community. The priority network was developed about 10 years ago, originally first by the Ped Bike Issues Task Force, once there was standalone money for bike ped improvements. And so those are the ones where you see the standalone projects on our list, Mass Street, the 21st Street Bike Boulevard, those sorts of projects that this plan helps shape what gets fed into those prioritized lists. So I don't know that, we can have a conversation if anybody saw anything or want to talk about anything, but this is the part where I think we really want you to spend some time with it and do some work. So we're meeting with you to give you an assignment to hopefully come back to set us all up to be prepared for that conversation next time, which will be.
This is where people notice that we want to change.
Yes, and it's tied to the comments. Yeah, and so you can mark up the places you want to talk about as for changes to the map. Maybe there's other places you have changes you want to talk about on the map. And those are the things that we would like you to bring back with us so we can understand and have a big list because we want to try to do it in a really organized fashion, I think, of how we're going to talk about it. For the loop segments, we're working through some alignment scenarios to bring some proposals back to explore with you. But in some of the other ones, like we're working on some geometry changes that are related to K10 expansion and roads that are getting built. Like the line is here, but really the road is getting built a little bit. It's going to look a little different. Some of those things we'll work to update. You don't have to tell us to update, but there may be other things where this is here, but really there needs to be that intersection type improvement I talked about, or these other things. And we want so there may be other things you have on the list. Write them down. We may ask for those when we send out the agenda, so we can be prepared then to make one master list that we can then kind of run through in a systematic way. So we're not trying to jump all over as we document what changes we're looking at, both for a map version, but also for text, so we can tell that story. My thought process is now, typically with our bike plan, we would have our 2 phases of public engagement. And that would be it. And we're going to do this work here. I think with the loop segments and the amount of interest that there is with the public for alignment choices that we have, if we have options in those spaces, we need to do another specific open house engagement to propose, to show the public and get feedback specifically about those sections. So we are setting ourselves up with time to intend to do that. So what we bring back will be a conversation we'll have with you. And then we're still planning for a separate open house that would be specific for probably the 2 segments that are the ones we heard the most feedback about, the ones that are within the city limits currently.
All of the black dashed lines are future bikeway
Correct.
in that growth here, and then I know some of those black dashed lines go solid, but I'm assuming that's the well, I go from Louisiana Street to Castle on 27th Street, and it's a black dash line, except when it gets close to, yeah, I mean, I think it's just, like right in there, then right in there. Yeah. So
Those are
are
intended to be,
good,
yes,
okay.
yes,
A lot of-
mapping.
a lot of future bikeways that.
Yes, yeah.
And we are working to coordinate with, there's some other planning processes that are happening right now actively also that are interested in by elements of the bikeway plan, the Wakarusa work that the county's doing around the Wakarusa watershed and bikeway access. We're working to coordinate with them to make sure that the things that we have in our plan and they have in their plan are consistent. And then we'll be working with the North Lawrence corridor study work, area work, to make sure that we can decide how, if we're proposing something and phasing it, is it get incorporated into their process, and how we end up with something that's either leaving space to modify our plan after their work is done, since their work's a lot more in-depth and specific, and we can't predict all the things that they might come up with in those work sets. So we're also trying to do some of those things also as those pieces move.
I do question, and this is not a suggested or flow, I'm just curious. Do we have the capability to do kind of almost like a watershed, but like a bike shed mapping to identify, if we assume that these are gaps, just take them at face value. I imagine that some of these gaps would be more significant effects on like a bike shed or like a watershed than others. Is that something that has been looked at or?
We don't have so I think what you need for that is like a network analyst, like you need something different built that we do not have built. We talked about that. The closest maybe thing is we could send you bikeway demand. Okay, so one of the analysis. No, you put me on the spot, but we do have in the last bikeway plan or 2 plans ago, there was an analysis and I'm gonna go try to find it and see so I can show you, but there was an analysis done that's based on origins and destinations at large. It's not tied to the network necessarily, but it's looking at proximity and all of those things. And it's called basically a latent bicycle demand heat map. And I think that's exactly what you may be thinking about in terms of wanting to see over this network, because what it's going to show you is where there is higher density housing and higher destinations, which then is going to inform the proximity of those, where there's more potential for bike trips based on distance. And so we have that you could use as a proxy. That's going to be the closest thing we have.
Yeah, like a network.
It's not the same as that, but it's the closest we have that would be an analysis to show where there's basically based on data, like where there's higher potential for bike prior trips.
Really wide. If there's like, there's this critical juncture where it's like, impression really only place you can cross, the major road. It's, it's a gap and maybe a map, also it's significant because it kind of affects everything downstream.
Yeah.
Everyone moves south.
Yeah.
you know.
So this is what's in the current, this is what's in the current plan. That those talking about in terms of demand, and we've updated this map. We've updated the base version of this that we could put that map on top of and send out to you. Would you like that?
Yeah.
Cause that's like an export that we can do. No, I think, but that's why I'm trying to tell you what we do have that could be useful in helping make that decision, because I think then you're having the conversation where you see, oh, this gap now maybe looks really a lot more significant and important because this is, and we can give you the information about how this is built basically, but it's basically latent bicycle demand, and it's based on all of these variables of input into a heat map. So it's not tied to the network like what you're talking about, like a network analyst flow, and we don't have a data set up that way for bikes. We do for PED, but we don't for bikes. There's more now, yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why, but it's hard because there's so much disconnectivity, and then the question is about in all those variables, how you feed those, because do you, again, back to the traffic calming conversation, calming, not traffic, the temporary traffic control, where it's, does the bike operate as a pet or does the bike operate as a vehicle in the street? When you build that network, if you were going to use the pet, do you use the ped stuff? Do you use it becomes a lot more nuanced and challenging than to build that bike shed, because people do operate in those places where you're talking about like those bottlenecks. They use both of those types, they use the streets, whether or not whatever volume, but then they're also using the ped. And so it creates a lot of challenges to make like about assumptions and how you're building that. We've thought about it. We've looked at tools. Hopefully you can tell that as I'm trying to explain it, like in terms of thinking about how we can help ourselves make decisions, basically.
But we can send, we can.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you have this homework. And the goal really is just to familiarize yourself with what we have, to come back and at least make a list of, based on what you read, what the areas you think are the highest value to talk about. And we're going to ask you that question before we send out the agenda so we can have a list of all those areas. Know that we're working on some stuff on our end that we know based on development, based on conversations we're having internally about options there that exist for alignments to close those pieces of the loop and that sort of stuff. So we'll bring those back out. Any other thoughts or questions? We're getting into the heat of the work, so.
Still need bike photos. And the one that.
It's just-
Yeah, bike photos. See someone where they need to have a helmet on, make sure they're safe, take a picture, to me.
Make sure you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
Preferably.
Dashboards, no, like, make sure you're driving your car safely while you do it.
Trying to my kid to do it. I'm like, get a picture of that. She's like, Mom. So what? Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. On the table.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
a couple over here.
Okay. So hopefully you can see as this process, we're starting to come together, all the stuff that we've documented after we have these next conversations about network and the other priorities. We will be then doing our last kind of loop open house, and then we'll be working to draft a plan that reflects all of this work that we've put together. To then put out a draft plan for a final kind of comment and review before we go through an approval process.
What will the end product of our homework, what will we bring back? I mean,
we will email you when we're getting ready for our next meeting, we will email you and ask you for, basically, you can take a picture of what you've marked up on the map so we can see what areas you want to talk about. If you have a bulleted list, that will be fine. We're going to use that to build a list for what everybody wants to talk about, so we can guide a conversation in a systematic way. So if everybody, like we are, like I can already tell you whether or not you say loop, we're going to be talking about loop. But if you also, but if we didn't know that and already have it on our radar and everybody says we need to talk about this thing, then we're going to make sure it's on the list and at the top so we can prioritize the conversations that we need to have and be ready and prepared to address, because that may mean on our behalf, we need to go talk to internal staff in different places, whether that's Parks and Rec or streets or engineering, and be prepared to come to have conversations about any of those elements. So it's giving us a heads up basically, so that way we can put together the big list to work through at the meeting. And then that'll help us decide if we get to a list and we're like, oh, we're not going to be able to do this in 2 hours. What does that mean? And do we decide at that point to do some smaller work groups, like offline with not quorum? We could do some smaller work groups and then bring something back. That could be an option we decide. We could do some individual meetings with you if like we see, oh, one person really has like 200 ideas they want to talk about. Then that could be a way for us to come and sit down and have a conversation and help prioritize or figure. I mean, I think it's just to help us with the workflow. Yeah, I think you can take, if you mark it up so much that you from a picture can't tell, we can arrange to get them from you to scan them. That's something we could share back out with everybody. You all as part of this body are subject to COMA, Kansas Open Meetings, and Kansas Open Records. So you can't have conversations offline with a quorum or majority of the members. So we can't just create an open forum where you're all doing something in a collective way that's not viewable to the public. And so this is the way that we can collect information from all of you and then reshare it at the meeting, which keeps us out of trouble with doing the public's work in the public space. Yes.
But I do think it's worthwhile, just in a transportation context, that, that steering committees think about, consider environmental justice, simply because the environmental justice is something that been, removed from the repeal at the federal level, basically. So, like NPO is probably not allowed to look at environmental justice, but I don't believe that means that's not something that we can't look at. So there's kind of a dearth now. It is not just, I believe it's been federally prohibited for our metropolitan planning organization to look at each environmental justice, but that doesn't mean we can't, I believe. So I just want to put that thought out there. I don't necessarily know where the conversation would lead, but I think it's important, given the federal context, to at least think about it, acknowledge it properly.
Yeah, we cannot do federally funded work around environmental justice. We cannot write the words environmental justice in the plan. It's a MPO funded document. So, yes.
We can still talk about it then?
You may, yes. Okay. We'll be in touch then soon. So get to work. We're looking at an early December meeting. So we can hopefully do a loop open house before the holidays. That's our goal. So.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Follow us.
Yes.
Become the de facto.
Yes, we'll have more information after this, we're doing that work right now. And so with our committees and what we're prepared to share with you after we hear from you, we'll be able to know, we've saved some dates, but we'll know, I think, as the work evolves, whether or not we're going to be able to achieve that. If we aren't going to be to achieve that, we will say that. You're like, if we can't have reasonable notification and other things, we will not do a meeting. We will say that timeline doesn't work and prioritize. So just so you know, from me to hear that, like, if we get to a place where we still think there's too many questions before we're ready to go back out with whatever we're prepared for, we will make timing changes before we will sacrifice our values. Okay. Okay, thank you.